Let's make your business cook. Independent chefs who want to build and scale their personal and private chef business and call their own shots? Subscribe here for tips, hacks, and tactics to get clients, money, and freedom. So before we begin, like and subscribe below.
You stand there and your jaws practically drop to the floor as the person tells you, well, I don't see where it says that I have to pay you. And you think, I did the services. I provided you with a service. You owe me the money. And they simply hang up the phone. And you have no recourse. And that happened to me once. And then I got some help. That particular client I'd been serving for a number of months, and the total that they owed me when I finally had that phone call was $25,000. I had a newborn in my arms, was trying to raise our family, and my husband and the rest of us were planning on going on a vacation to Mexico, and I wouldn't have access to a phone. That was 2004, and I decided that the best thing for me to do was to stay back at home with my newborn, let my little 5-year-old boy and my husband go to Mexico without me and the baby, and pursue this with vigor. And I did. I got an attorney. I got in touch with this company's corporate offices, and really had to make a stink on a daily basis to get paid for this bill. And I ended up getting paid, but I lost a family vacation to Mexico, and I spent hours and hours being aggravated by somebody who didn't want to do right, but instead wanted to rely on the fact that I hadn't protected myself. And now and again, you're going to run into people like that. You know, part of the reason that you have contracts and cancellation agreements is for people who want to be dishonest. But for the most part, that isn't going to happen. Now, we haven't had that situation since, because I got an attorney. We wrote up our terms and conditions, which has our cancellation policy within it, and we never had that problem again. Now, I was starting my business as a private chef service. We started in 1997, and it wasn't until 2004 that somebody tried to rip me off and not pay, not because I hadn't done the services, but simply because they could get away with it because I didn't have the backing that was needed. And it cost me nearly $25,000. So in 2004, we got our contract. It cost us a bit to put it together, but we never got ripped off after that. We always had the information that we needed. We did have somebody try and walk away since then, but we were able to collect. And in 2021, recently, I found a small hole in my terms and conditions in my cancellation policy, because we have, if you know, my business is in Lake Tahoe, and it's been international news about the fires that we've had here. And my cancellation policy has a force majeure, and it has a 21-day or 14-day cancellation policy, but not what happens within 72 hours of an event when everything hits the fan. So just this week, I made another change to our policy to cover a situation that hadn't arisen in these 25 years of doing business. So we've made 3 changes. One, we did business for a long time without ever having terms and conditions or a cancellation policy. Then we were in business until 2004, so 7 years before we got our cancellation policy. And then 10 years after that, we simplified our cancellation policy. It was really wordy. We had a couple clients complain that the words were too long. It was too cumbersome. You know, they shouldn't have to read through such a contract. So we turned all that legalese into friendly language, and haven't had a complaint about it since. And then here we are in 2021, and we've made one more adjustment to it because we realized there was a state of emergency in our town that needed to be accounted for. So really, it isn't that much work, and yet the amount of money I know that we've protected by having that document has been huge, starting with that first $25,000 experience that I don't ever want to live again. Neither do I want you to have to suffer it again. So we're here talking about whether or not you're willing to take the risk, chef, of working for free, because there are some people who will walk away if you can't hold them accountable. But for the most part, the reason that you want to have a cancellation policy isn't just because people are bad, because the truth is that most people are good, that you're going to do a great job as well, but you still need this document. So let's first talk about what it is. The cancellation policy is a document that outlines expectations for your service, what they're going to receive and what you need to do. And the reason that it's really important is that it's the way that you will protect yourself from lost business and revenue. Super important. I'll just say it again. It's the way you protect yourself from lost business and lost revenue. There's a difference between them. And here's what a good policy should contain. A good cancellation policy should have a fee or a penalty for cancellation and should account for enough time built into that policy that you can rebook that spot. Because that's really the thing that you're doing. You're giving somebody the promise that you will serve them for a certain date. It might be next week, it might be 6 months from now, it might be 2 years from now. But in the circumstance with the fire that we just dealt with, I'd turned down business for 4 months for that 4 days of service that I was going to serve that client on Lake Tahoe. I had turned down business for 4 months because I promised to serve them. And that's why I want that cancellation policy for me, because I don't want to lose revenue. And if they cancel on me, I want to have time to rebook it. And by the time they canceled it, I did not have time to rebook. And I didn't have time to put my staff on other jobs. So my staff still needed to get paid. So it should contain a fee or a penalty for cancellation and also enough time built in that you can rebook that business so that you're not losing revenue. Now, what we do and what we find pretty consistent in the catering world is a 50% advance payment. We don't call that a deposit in the state of California. You could look it up, but a deposit has different rules than an advance payment. So in our writing, we call it an advance payment or reservation payment, you might call it. And there's 4 reasons why having a cancellation policy is really important. Let me tell you what they are. Number 1, for protection. It protects you against lost revenue and the costs that you're incurring before that event takes place. So for instance, I've reserved staff, I may have done grocery shopping. In the case of this fire for California that we suffered 2 weeks ago, we'd reserved rentals that were non-refundable. So you want to be able to cover your butt and the costs as well that you're incurring on behalf of a client. Number 2, the reason that a cancellation policy is really important is that it demonstrates your customer's commitment. It literally gives them a chance to tell you, yes, I promise, we are in a relationship together. You're going to cook for me on this date. I'm going to show up. I'm going to pay you. And when they agree, turns out they're less likely to cancel. So somebody that doesn't sign a cancellation policy can just be like, no, sorry, I'm canceling on you. And there's nothing to hold them to the promise either, which is why when you get married, you got to do it in front of God and everybody that you know and love, because you're making a big promise together. That's why you got to do it in front of other people, because it's hard and you got to be held to the promise. Same if you're making an agreement for being a private chef with somebody. You want them to demonstrate their commitment to you, and you then have a commitment to them. The third reason that you want to have a cancellation policy is truly that it shows professionalism. Now, you may think, wow, my cancellation policy will turn people away. But in fact, it does the opposite. It actually just clearly outlines for them what the expectations are, what their timeframes are. And in the case of the fires, I had 4 events that roughly represented $40,000 in the last 2 weeks come up against the existing cancellation policy. Now, every single one of my cancellations that I had had a different relationship with each person. One was a longtime client, one was an event company, one was just staff that I was putting out, one was an entire event that I'd already done cooking for, another was a corporate event and they wanted to put a different date. Like, all the circumstances were different, so I had to handle each circumstance according to its merits and what was happening at the time and when the cancellation took place. But that didn't deter any of them. It just gave us the framework around which we needed to solve problems. And we had problems we needed to solve. The fires were real, and there were people, and you'll have this with COVID as well, where you need to know what framework you need to work within. Now, my cancellation policy, I never try and just say, oh, this is the letter, this is what you signed to, so, go pound sand. I never want to just exercise my right to put it to them and profit off of their misfortune. I always find that when people cancel, they don't usually want to. There's usually a reason why. And so I don't want to profit off of the poor circumstances that have led to their cancellation. So I always know that my cancellation policy protects me, and that gives me a place from which I can negotiate them. And I often get a more loyal customer, a customer that rebooks, and a customer that appreciates how professionally they deal with the situation. So don't believe for a second that they're going to be turned away by you having a cancellation policy. It's going to create a really nice container around which you can have that agreement and that relationship. And it also shows your absolute professionalism, right? It shows that you're organized, that you're established, that you know what you're doing, and that you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot happen. I mean, what's written in my policy shows that I know my business well enough that I know how we can walk in and out of this relationship together. So it actually attracts people more because it establishes my business as a reputable and professional one. And the fourth reason that you want to have a cancellation policy is that it provides accountability. It really holds your customers accountable if they need to cancel, and they'll think twice if they need to cancel. I have customers that call and say, this is what's happening, and my guest count just dropped, or just this summer, they called and they said, well, I'm just calling to check what the cancellation policy is. One whole set of our family can't get to this event because they've all been exposed to COVID, and we just want to see what our options are. I said, well, here are your options. And we looked at the cancellation policy, and I said, here's what I think you should do. And they took my recommendations. But it was that framework of our cancellation policy that allowed us to have a good conversation without me panicking, right? And without them being confused and wondering what could happen. So I highly recommend that you have a cancellation policy as you're working as a private or personal chef. If you're working independently, your income is at stake and at the risk of somebody walking away from you or not keeping up their end of the bargain. And the way that you do that is by having terms and conditions, a relationship in writing. Now, here's the 5 most important considerations that you need to remember about your cancellation policy, chef. And then we're going to wrap it up here and with a couple lessons that I've learned. 5 things. Number 1, it must be in writing. When you say something verbally, you can say to them, hey, I just want to confirm this is what we agreed on, and they agree, and then you go ahead and put that right in an email. So if you don't have time to go to Rocket Lawyer or hire an attorney or rip off a cancellation policy that you pulled off 3 other people's websites that you merged into your own and did your own writing project, by the way, that's good enough. It's not ripping off. It's called research and development. You need to put in writing. And it is good enough for you to say, this email will memorialize our conversation, right? And we agreed to. And you put it in writing. At the very least, if you're at the beginning stages, that's what you can do to put things in writing, including your cancellation policy. And the second thing is that it must be communicated to the customer. You can't just have it on a piece of paper, that's in your desk and say, well, we have a cancellation policy, I just never send it to you. It actually has to be communicated. So in our system, and we do have a system that we've worked on paper for years, one of the things that we made sure that we checked off our to-do list for every client was to send them, here's the estimate for our services. When you sign it, you are agreeing to our terms and conditions, and it contained a link to it. And our terms and conditions are actually just posted on our website for Hey Chef. And in our emails, it just has a little hyperlink and they can click on it if they want. We don't ask our clients to sign, to like read it and check the box and sign, because you and I know that there's all kinds of things that we just scroll through, we don't actually read it, and we sign. And I don't even want to get into the legalities of whether or not that can be upheld in a court or not. We simply make the presumption that we send it to you and that our terms and conditions are part of this policy, and when you sign, you have agreed to them. We don't make them check a box or sign on that. We just give them the hyperlink. And it says it in a funny way. It says, stuff happens, so if you want to read it, here's our terms and conditions. But if you don't want to bother with it, no problem, it's here for you. So it's actually laid out in a way that it's friendly, it's approachable, and it's being of service, saying here's what you would want if you've got any questions. Number 3, it should be, if you have one, on your website. Because then when people are finding you, they can find your cancellation policy if they're curious about it. And sometimes I have people that have looked it up beforehand. Usually people are just looking it up and then calling me once stuff has hit the fan, and then their their plans have really changed. So I'm happy to just turn that into a customer service conversation, not a cancellation conversation. Okay, the 4th thing to remember is that you cannot float an entire boat on just one thing. You need many things that make up the strength of your business and your position to collect from a customer. And so your cancellation policy is only one of those things. Your protections that you have as you build a business, and they'll start out small. It's okay if you're just starting. The bigger your business is, the more things you have in place that create what I call a suite of protection, right? So for those of you remember that, a human resources, customer service, and risk management is what my corporate background is in. And I worked for a ski resort that now is owned by a company you might have heard of called Vail, one of the largest ski holding corporations in the US. And our local ski resort here had all kinds of operations, from spa, hotel, lodging, housekeeping, bus fleets, and transportation, a medical facility, a fire facility, and 11 restaurants, and a ski school, and a daycare. We had all kinds of stuff going on there. But there were 11 food and beverage restaurants, and we did events on site. We had a golf course where we did weddings every weekend. There were all kinds of things that we needed a suite of protection for. So when I say a suite, when you bought your ski ticket, you pulled the adhesive off the back to put your ski ticket on your jacket. When you went up on the lift, there was signage about, keep your hands and your feet inside the car at all times. When you went to ski school, you signed a release when you dropped off your kid. When you went to rentals, you signed a release. There were many, many things that happened from the moment you walked on site and were exposed to the risks of being at a recreational park that is a ski resort, that made up the suite of our protection. So that if you broke a leg, or if you fell out of a ski lift, or if your child fell out of a ski chair lift while they were under the protection and guidance of a ski coach, then we had all the information that we needed put together so that we could appropriately respond. Not tell them to go away and pound sand, but so that we could appropriately respond and be liable where appropriate for our actions. Okay, so you need to have a suite of information that informs your client about the relationship that the two of you share. And it just starts with a cancellation policy. Now for us, for our business, I'll share with you, for Hey Chef, our suite looks like this. We have emails that back things up. If anybody ever said they didn't want to pay, and I've had to do this before, I can pull up every email that we've shown we've had a relationship, that we intended to serve, that we did serve. We have the estimate that we sent out to you that you signed. The estimate says that it references the emails and the terms and conditions. We have the email that we send automatically that says, for your files, here's the terms and conditions. So you can see that if I were ever in front of a judge, and I've had to do it twice, once with Visa Arbitration International, and once locally because the venue and the person was local. So once in front of a local judge at small claims court. I have a suite of protections. I can say yes to the judge. Here are the things that support that I am due this payment. And I don't have all this stuff like put together for every client because I don't expect that things are going to go badly. I expect that things are going to go well. Now and again, I run into a situation. Truly, it's been 2 or 3 times in the last 25 years. But every time in the last 2 or 3 times in the last 25 years, I have not lost. It's taken me time, but I've recovered all the money that was due me. And it isn't that, oh, I won and I did such a great job. I simply got what was due our company because we provided a wonderful service and we should have been paid. And that person was trying to snake out and avoid and all that sort of stuff. And my suite of protection served its purposes. So let's see. So the suite of protection is in the description of services, in your pricing, it's in your estimate, it's in your agreement, it's in your emails. It should be in a lot of places that you're communicating that. And it doesn't mean that every conversation you have with someone that you have to prepare them for disaster and tell them like, oh my gosh, in case you want to cancel, well, in case you're going to cancel next week, I'm just calling to confirm I'll be there. Not that. Maybe just in your signature block, it says FAQs. And you're sending somebody to a little page that's on a shared Google Doc. You don't have to have a website where you're giving them information, right? There's plenty of ways that you can do this without spending any money, not any money. Trust me on this. Now, when it's written and communicated clearly, and someone who gives you their credit card doesn't need to, here's what I want to tell you. Sorry, I was just reading from my notes. The 5 important considerations. The 5th thing is that when it's written and communicated clearly, and they have access to that document, and it's on your website, and they can see it in your signature block and things like that. When they sign something and give you their credit card, or even if they're not signing something, but they give you their credit card, either through an electronic portal or over the phone verbally, them providing you their credit card is deemed consent and agreement to your terms and conditions. So you don't need to have a whole lot of systems built around, like, here's all the stuff you need to sign, and here I'm going to send it to you, and I need to get it back from you, and I need to make sure that I got it back from you, and all that. If you just have a conversation, you say, I want you to understand that if you have any questions, if you're curious about the cancellation policy, that's in the signature block of all my emails. And when I take your credit card and you provide that to me, that's deemed your agreement with our policy. Would that be all right? Great. Are you ready to provide? Are you ready to provide your credit card information? And on you go. So I just wanted to give you that information because chefs who are just starting out, they think that they need all of this legal stuff to protect them. And for the most part, everything's going to go great. But what you want to do is understand how the law works. And the law says that if somebody's given up their credit card information to you, they understand they're making an agreement with you. And that should be of great comfort to you, right? But you still need to make sure it's in writing and that you've communicated to them that information and that they can get it without having to come and ask you for it. They can get it on their own schedule. Now, the last thing that I just want to remind you is that, we started our business in 1997. It wasn't until 2004 when I had a newborn and I had a client trying to skip out on a $25,000 bill with me that I created my first cancellation policy and terms and conditions. So I did business for a long time before I ever ran into somebody who didn't want to do right by me. And then in 2013, we revisited it again and simplified it to make it really simple, shorter, friendly language. And then here we are in 2021. So there have been 3 times where I've really had to address this and do a nice job of polishing it up. You know, we have our cancellation 1.0, cancellation 2.0, and I just did our cancellation policy 3.0. So it hasn't been a lot of time, but it certainly has protected us from a lot of situations that I don't even know because they didn't exist, because I have that in place. Do you need an attorney? A lot of people ask me, so I need an attorney to get that, right? Well, that depends. If I were you, I would take a look at what the cancellation policies are of the different companies that are around you, the other companies who are doing what you want to do and that you want to be like, and just print out 3 or 4 versions, right? Go like, oh, this company uses this. Oh, this company uses this. Oh, this company uses this. You're going to find a lot of things in common, and then just craft your own. You know, if you find that it can be penetrated and it doesn't work to represent you, then maybe you want to have somebody more skilled than you overlook it and make sure that it can be enforceable, right? But go ahead and start on your own by doing your first. Get on Rocket Lawyer or any of those other free places that will give you a template if you want, or just take a look at what's out there and what people are using and craft your own. If you're going to do that, and here you'd want to stay on for this bonus here, I'm going to give you some information about what should be in there. Again, with my degree in risk management, the work that I've done with legal contracts for a long time, I can tell you the components that need to be in there. So stay on right now for this bonus if you'd like that. But do you need an attorney? It depends. Hey, how much profit are you making? If you're not profitable yet, chef, you don't need to pay an attorney to put together your cancellation policy. You can write one. You write one. And if you want some guidance, look at some cancellation policies that are on websites of companies like yours. They're out there. Mine is out there. Take a look at that stuff, right? Make it your own, all right? The question is, how much profit are you making and how much you've got to lose? And that will help you determine whether or not you need to have somebody more skilled than you to help you. Okay, so the last thing that I want to give you, and then I'm going to run and work with some other chefs, is that to be enforceable, it has to have mutual benefit. So it should provide protection for both parties. You can't just make it one-sided, or it can't be enforceable. And it should contain 4 different clauses. And I will go over those 4 different clauses on another video. Please hit like, please hit comments, please subscribe, and let me know what other questions you want to know about that I can help you with for your chef business. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.